Firstly, we're going to be talking about this attack that happened on Tel Aviv. Today, Hezbollah launched land-to-land ballistic missiles on Israel. This is becoming more of a norm when you have Hezbollah conducting attacks on central Israel. 3 ballistic missiles. Israel claimed that they intercepted 2 of them and that 1 landed. However, we don't have confirmation, of course, as to the validity of these interceptions coming from Israel. What we do know for sure is that Hezbollah are now regularly targeting central Israel, including Tel Aviv and other very important and sensitive locations. However, there's a lot of talk happening about yesterday's attack when it comes to Hezbollah. Firstly, the distance, the location, the target, and the level of damage inflicted on the genocide forces of Israel. And now Israel, some figures in Israel, including the president, they have the audacity to say that this is a crime against humanity. Targeting genocide soldiers having dinner before they conduct genocide operations is a crime against humanity, and the Israeli president wants organizations to condemn these attacks, but not condemn the burning of people last night in Gaza. You see, this is what Israel does. They get a beating, they get humiliated militarily, and they take out all of their frustration and anger on the innocent civilians, on children, on wounded people, on people with on IV drips, with people who are simply seeking refuge in hospitals because Israel destroyed their houses. They go and burn them. Why do they do that? Because they are an army, a genocidal army of cowards. They do not know how to actually engage in man-to-man battle. You know, what are we talking about? These people are used to just fighter jets and attacking and bullying innocent civilians. But when it comes to targeting the people who actually target them, they fail. And we have confirmations every single day coming from the ground. Firstly, we had this attack in Gaza today, where more ambushes happened on the Israeli forces in Gaza. One of them was an ambush against a whole Israeli brigade. And in addition to that, we had an attack on a troop carrier that was completely destroyed. Mind you, the older type troop carriers, not the modern ones. The modern ones are supposed to be more protected, the Namir ones, but they targeted one, what appeared to be an M113. And usually, even if you have about 16 people in that troop carrier, they all are gone. So they're facing that in North Gaza, where they are inflicting a barbaric genocide against the people and a blockade. And now Benjamin Netanyahu is considering recognizing the area as an area full of combatants, meaning the people who are asked to leave and do not leave for any reason, whether they cannot leave or they do not want to leave, they are treated as combatants. So Israel targets them as if they were combatants. This is another step in the genocide machine of Israel. Not that they were treating anyone in Gaza nicely, you know. There's a reason why the people of Gaza have no trust whatsoever in Israel. They act like they're there to protect them. With some people that say, oh, look, Hamas is doing this. And, you know, we're here to protect you and save you from Hamas. But really and truly, these people know exactly who they're facing and what they are facing. They are facing a genocidal entity that is deliberately targeting innocent civilians. And last night's massacre was another example of the genocidal intent when it comes to Israel. They target people living, in tents, seeking refuge, and they are looking to expand things further. So, with this expansion, what do we have? Firstly, Benjamin Netanyahu is now warning the United Nations. He's saying that, you need to leave this area. You can't stay in this area. And we are to conduct an operation against Hezbollah, and your presence there is hindering our attempts. So we had this brief video from Benjamin Netanyahu.
Mr. Secretary General, get the UNIFIL forces out of harm's way. It should be done right now, immediately. אנו מצרים על הפגיעה בחיילי יוניפיל, ואנחנו עושים כל שביכולתנו כדי למנוע פגיעה אחת. אבל הדרך הפשוטה והמתבקשת כדי להבטיח זאת, היא פשוט להוציא אותם מאזור הסכנה. אני רוצה מכאן לפנות ישירות למזכ"ל האו"ם. הגיע הזמן שתוציא את יוניפיל ממעוזי החיזבאללה וממרחבי הלחימה. צה"ל ביקש זאת שוב ושוב, והוא נתקל בסירוב שוב ושוב, שכל כולו מכוון לתת חומת מגן אנושית למחבלי חיזבאללה. הסירוב שלך לפנות את חיילי יוניפיל הופך אותם לבני ערובה של חיזבאללה. זה מסכן גם אותם וגם את חיי חיילינו.
There he goes again, saying that Hezbollah are now using them as human shields. If Hezbollah are using them as human shields, why don't they complain? Why don't the UN forces in Lebanon complain? Oh, hello, UN. Hezbollah are using us as human shields. We're not safe here. They actually complain about Israel. They say, we don't want to leave our post. We're here on a mission, right? United Nations mission, and we're not going to leave. And Netanyahu isn't just sitting there, threatening and warning. They are actually destroying bases of the United Nations. Now, we have confirmations coming that they are targeting these areas deliberately. Again, they are targeting them deliberately. UN says Israeli tanks burst into peacekeeper base. Well, not just burst into, they destroyed the entry. The United Nations said on Sunday Israeli tanks burst through the gates of a base of its peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon, the latest accusation of Israeli violations and attacks denounced by its own allies. The UNIFIL peacekeeping force said 2 Israeli Merkava tanks destroyed the main gate of a base and forcibly entered before dawn on Sunday morning. After the tanks left, shells exploded 100 meters away, releasing smoke which blew across the base and sickened UN personnel, it said in a statement. In its version of events, of course, if it's version of events, why should anyone care about their version of events? They're liars. They're so generous with this genocidal entity. The Israeli military said militants of the Iran-backed group Hezbollah had fired anti-tank missiles at Israeli troops, wounding 25. The attack was very close to a UNIFIL post and a tank helping evacuate the casualties under fire, then backed into the UNIFIL post, it said. It is not storming a base. It is not trying to enter a base. It was a tank under heavy fire. Mass casualty event backing up to get out of harm's way. The military's international spokesperson, Nadav Shoshani, told reporters. In a statement, the military said it used a smoke screen to provide a cover for the evacuation of the wounded soldiers, but its actions pose no danger to the UN peacekeeping force. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a statement addressed to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the time has come for you to withdraw UNIFIL from Hezbollah strongholds and from the combat zones. The IDF has requested this repeatedly and has met with repeated refusal, which has the effect of providing Hezbollah with human shields. Guterres paid tribute to UNIFIL peacekeepers who remain in all positions. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said in a statement issued later on Sunday, adding that the UN flag continues to fly. The Secretary General reiterated a warning that peacekeepers must not be targeted. He said attacks against peacekeepers are in breach of international law, including international humanitarian law. They may constitute a war crime, Dujarric said. UNIFIL has said previous Israeli attacks on watchtower, cameras, communications equipment, and lighting had limited its monitoring abilities. UN sources say they fear any violations of international law in the conflict will be impossible to monitor. US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, in a call on Sunday with his Israeli counterpart Yoav Gallant, reinforced the importance of Israel taking all necessary measures to ensure the safety and security of UNIFIL forces and Lebanese armed forces. According to a readout of the call, Austin also pressed Gallant on the need for Israel to pivot from military operations in Lebanon to a diplomatic pathway to provide security for civilians on both sides of the border as soon as feasible. Again, generosity. Now, why does Israel want the UNIFIL to move? Like they said, it would harm our ability to monitor their actions, the UNIFIL said. Which means if Israel starts to commit worse crimes in South Lebanon, the UN would not be able to monitor them. So they want to get away with their crimes. That's why they target the UN forces, like they targeted the UN forces everywhere previously. In Gaza and in Lebanon, we had the Qana massacre previously, where they targeted UNIFIL forces. And they are continuing to target UNIFIL forces to this day, posing a threat to everyone included. However, the United States, in a very typical manner, are, being ultra generous with Israel, stay away from UNIFIL positions, try not to directly attack them, try not to do this, try not to do that, acting exceptionally generous with an entity that has been committing war crimes for the past year. That's apart from the previous crimes they have been committing. Now, what are they doing with Lebanon, and what are they planning to continue doing in Lebanon? Firstly, we've had less attacks in Beirut in the last few days. And I'm hearing a couple of people saying that the screen is frozen. Let's have a look. I hope now it's working fine. Is it working now? Let's check if this is... Yeah, we're back on that. So we had a bit of a communication problem. I was talking about what Israel is intending to do when it comes to Lebanon and what they have been doing. Well, of course, now the UNIFIL is complaining about their actions, trying to restrict their operations in Lebanon, now storming their places. We had reports that Israel decreased their attacks in Beirut. And it wasn't like an act of niceness coming from Israel. Some observers said that the United States had requested from Israel to stop attacking in Beirut. Firstly, a network of informants has been found in the southern suburb of Beirut in the past few days. So Israel is clearly operating people on the ground to monitor what's happening. So this means a temporary halt of certain operations could be there to protect people who work for Israel. That's number one. Number two, when it comes to stopping these attacks, well, they're still attacking everywhere in Lebanon. As a matter of fact, today they targeted one of the most northern parts of Lebanon, meaning they're attacking everywhere. And Benjamin Netanyahu came out and clarified afterwards that we will continue targeting Hezbollah mercilessly. We will continue targeting Hezbollah mercilessly everywhere in Lebanon, including in Beirut, which means that they are not stopping. And any temporary halt of the operations in Beirut, or Israel's barbarism, really, and mass terror in Beirut, not operation, means that it's only a tactical move from Israel. It's not intended to be there as something permanent. And we're still seeing that with evidence coming from the ground in Lebanon. And with regards to Iran, they are still checking, what they can do. In the past couple of days, we've had reports from Israel that the smaller cabinet in Israel had a meeting. During this meeting, they're supposed to decide what's going to happen when it comes to Iran. Fact of the matter is, they haven't attacked Iran yet. There are probably many calculations. There are many countries involved in this. However, no one should rely on international pressure to work with Israel. And that's simply based on the pattern of behavior coming from Israel in the past year. Every time we were actually about to reach a certain point where we had a slight de-escalation or even a temporary ceasefire or a new ceasefire, Benjamin Netanyahu went and escalated with something. So he would have massacres in Gaza under the pretext of targeting someone from the resistance, which is a lie. He's only doing that who's only saying that to justify the massacres, not that they need justification. However, they are continuing that. When we almost had another deal with Hamas, and that's after Hamas already accepted the ceasefire, after Hamas already, don't forget from the beginning, told them we're willing to start engaging in negotiations and cease our operations, because we carried out the operation due to lack of cooperation from you with regards to our prisoners, administrative detention, our situation in Gaza and our situation in the West Bank that are now evident not only to the Palestinian people, but to the whole world and anyone monitoring the situation. And then he, of course, assassinated Ismail Haniyeh, and then we had the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. Reportedly, after there were certain moves coming from Western countries to try and de-escalate the situation when it comes to Lebanon, that would potentially include Gaza for a temporary period of 3 weeks that could later become a permanent ceasefire. Because don't forget, Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel stopped regarding Gaza as the main front. Now Gaza is a secondary front, officially a secondary front, and their main battle is with Lebanon. That's evident with the levels of forces deployed in Lebanon. And now we, of course, have the talks about a potential attack on Iran. Israel is suffering tremendous losses. None of the attacks that they have carried out against the Palestinian resistance or the Lebanese resistance brought any results that Israel itself declares it wants to achieve by these attacks: a reduction in the number of operations carried out against them, returning the people back safely to their homes in the north and in the areas surrounding Gaza, let alone, of course, eliminating Hamas and making Gaza not pose a threat alongside their other declared targets. They're making things worse, not only for their own troops suffering massive losses in Lebanon and in Gaza. Like I said, a whole brigade ambushed today and targeting troop carriers and Merkava tanks in North Gaza. And in Lebanon, well, you're seeing the helicopters going and evacuating the genocide forces from Lebanon back to Israel. And we had this attack from Hezbollah yesterday on Binyamina, where Israel admitted that 70 of its soldiers were wounded and 4 were killed in that drone attack coming from Hezbollah deep into Israeli territory, something that highlights the level of intelligence being practiced from Hezbollah. Hezbollah clearly still have intelligence information coming from inside of Israel. Otherwise, how would they know that troops from the Golani brigade are having dinner in a certain location at a certain time and carry out an operation and hit them accurately? They clearly have intelligence that's operational. They clearly have very advanced capabilities to implement the actions that they want to implement when it comes to attacking the genocide forces inside of Israeli territories, and they are still expanding the reach. Like I said today, 3 ballistic missiles on Tel Aviv. Israel tried to cover up the story as much as possible, saying they intercepted 2, and 1 landed in an unknown area. This is the usual talk. That's, of course, apart from the main city in the north, Haifa, being targeted on a daily basis with specific targets on strategic locations, but also in civilian populations as well. And they're causing a lot of destruction. Today we had attacks from Hezbollah on Carmiel, attacks in the north, and of course attacks on Haifa. And it's, it's not like these attacks are light. You're talking about very significant attacks. Like look at this attack here, for example. This was one of their attacks. That's in the north of Israel. And they are causing damage. They are causing damage in these places. This is in Safad, which is one of the most important northern towns. These are some interceptions coming from Israel, or attempted interceptions from the Iron Dome. And of course, when it comes to Gaza, you're still seeing similar scenes when it comes to that. Now, not only are they facing problems when it comes to stopping the attacks that are being carried out against them on a military side and on a civilian side and on infrastructure side, 2 strategic locations, they are facing increased problems when it comes to their forces. So we had a report saying that Israeli soldiers are sending letters to Benjamin Netanyahu, reservists, that they refuse to be deployed unless Benjamin Netanyahu signs a prisoner swap deal, and then they would be able to continue. And apparently, according to multiple reports coming from Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu had a lash out on the soldiers. He lashed out at them, saying, "How dare you? We are in the middle of a war, you're serving the enemy," and this and that. And of course, refusing to even reach an agreement with them when it comes to having a deal. Why is that happening? Well, it's because they do not want a deal. Specifically, Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu does not want a deal. Firstly, we've been talking about this operation in Lebanon as an act from Benjamin Netanyahu running forward from Gaza. He has a failure in Gaza. He hasn't been able to achieve what he wanted. Therefore, he runs forward to Lebanon in an attempt to escalate, and then Iran and the other locations too. So he hasn't really reached a deal when it comes to Gaza. He doesn't want to reach a deal. He only wants to escalate. And in the meantime, the people who should be the main thing that he is considering, the Israelis kidnapped in Gaza, are off the table, really. And that came and was very evident after the statements of Herzi Halevi that we spoke about at the time, who said that we might not bring back anyone from Gaza. So what do they want? What do they want? Based on the pattern, again, you base things on the pattern of behavior, they do not want a solution. Israel does not want a solution. And when we say Israel does not want a solution, the United States does not want a solution. And anyone in that sphere of the genocide cartel, they do not want a solution. They want to dictate how the region would look moving forward. They want to make sure that they give anyone resisting them in the region heavy blows to a level where they do not dare speak with Israel again. Why? Because Israel is the punching bag now in the region. Everyone is throwing blows at Israel, left, right, and center from so many countries. And although they try and intimidate the other side by massacres against civilians, against the most vulnerable, by destruction, deliberate destruction, it's not working. It isn't working because, firstly, the people who are fighting you know you very well. They have no faith in you. And you're talking about people with faith. You're talking people with belief. Not everything is based on worldly matters to these people. So they're facing a big problem. And the things that they are trying to inflict on others, mass exodus, ethnic cleansing, destruction, they are doing it with their own population. I mean, when it comes to the ethnic cleansing part, which was the main undeclared aim of the war on Gaza, the genocide in Gaza, the people are there, 400,000 people still in the northern part of Gaza without food, water, medicine, or anything, being burnt alive like we saw yesterday in tents. But they're still there. Who's leaving? The Israelis are leaving. Firstly, Israel, I don't know how they dared, they released stats in recent weeks saying that over 80%, approximately 86% of the population in the north would not go back even after we have a solution. Now, mind you, the figures were a little bit less before, as declared by Israel. Again, we take everything with a pinch of salt. But the longer this war goes, the more people have refusal to go back to any of these areas, because from their perspective, if we face this for 1 year without being in our homes, how would we be able to go back, especially when our country that's promising us that they want to eliminate the threat from the other side and trying to portray as if they have so much power, are not able to do anything but making things worse with their increase and escalation against the other side, resulting to wider expansion from their opponents into Israeli territory, making it the daily norm. And again, when it comes to Hezbollah, they're saying we still haven't started. So Hezbollah, with all of these attacks all across Israel now, putting millions of people in shelters, they're saying they haven't started. That's from the people who are still remaining in Israel. When we talk about people who fled the north and the south, we're not talking about the millions fleeing Israel for good and are done with the concept of Zionism and this idea of this pariah state. So he's increasing, and the inner problems, and mind you, at one point in history, Israel used to view its internal security as a very important matter. So in previous wars, they used to have most of their operations in their enemies' territories, and they used to be very quick, these operations, maybe some limited ground invasion of special forces, but internally, Israel, economically, at a societal level, tourism, everything is fine. But that hasn't been the case in the past year. From an economic perspective, they've been degraded 3 levels by Moody's, the biggest rating company in the world, and they're projected to degrade them even further with a negative projection for the future. Israel is one step away from being a state that is not worthy of investing in, which is a catastrophic position for Israel to be in, a country that is very reliant on foreign investment and technology and economy and technological advancements. They're facing that. At a societal level, well, they're split more than ever before. There are internal battles between people. Everyone who is calling for a ceasefire is being blamed by the authorities and anyone supporting the authorities as if they are Hamas supporters, although they raise Israeli flags and are Zionists at the end of the day. But everyone is Hamas, including Israeli Jewish Zionists. Do you understand how things are going? Military defeats in Gaza, military defeats in Lebanon, massive shock at a national level after the unprecedented blows coming from Iran, with a further threat that these attacks might come again. Now, if you are living in Israel and you are viewing everything around you, and you're seeing where your government is going, and you're seeing that they're failing, firstly, to protect Israelis, number one. They massacred them on the 7th of October and blamed the massacres on Hamas. They killed their prisoners in Gaza deliberately, and those who were not killed were targeted for attempted killing so that Israel can get rid of them and remove the leverage from the resistance against them, something that Hamas themselves warned from the beginning and said that even if you try and kill the majority of them and we have one, we'll ask for the same price. But Israel is thinking that we can take away the leverage, take away the heavy cards from Hamas, something that to this day hasn't worked completely. But they did kill a very big number from their own people in Gaza, as confirmed by Israelis themselves. Of course, you're not going to see that on mainstream media. Why should you? They'll post, sympathetic posts about the poor genocide forces who were killed, having dinner yesterday, as if they were angels trying to spread peace across the world. If you were there, you'd think, well, there is no solution. Firstly, the country that I'm living in, it's not giving me any prosperity. It's not giving me any reassurance. Sure as hell, this is not the safe haven for Jewish people. This is the most dangerous place for Jewish people. And the countries who are fighting us, they are not getting any weaker, even after the blows that they are getting that are visibly seen as significant blows, and that our government is telling us are affecting their ability, when they are not affecting any of their ability. Firstly, look at Gaza. The capacity of the Palestinian resistance to have an ambush against a whole brigade, targeting Israeli troop carriers and Merkavas and D9s every single day, ambushes, blowing a tunnel opening, everything, every single day inside of Gaza, and still having strategic missile capability to reach Tel Aviv. And we're not even talking about Lebanon. Well, Lebanon, they're only expanding everything on a day-to-day basis, and Israel has no answer to their strategic capabilities that disable Israel economically at a societal level. There's no normal life, shortage when it comes to goods, lack of productivity, and uncertainty, lack of security, danger on a day-to-day basis. All of that is not stopping Benjamin Netanyahu. And it's not stopping Benjamin Netanyahu because he is fully backed by the United States administration. This is something that some people fail to comprehend and blame it on the, for example, Zionist lobby in the United States. This is a US strategy. Israel is playing that part. They do definitely have their lobby and have their strength and have their reach in the United States establishment and in other establishments as well, who openly declare that they are Zionists. But it's not just about Israel. The United States, through Israel, wants to create a new precedent, set the bar up to a new level, and send a message not only to everyone in the region: don't dare attack Israel ever again in your life, otherwise this is what you will face, but also send a message to the bigger players who are challenging the United States when it comes to the position of a superpower and trying to prevent or delay as much as possible having a multipolar world as a fact. And it's not just them talking about this multipolarity. Iran is constantly talking about this multipolarity. Iran, whenever they are meeting anyone any officials coming to Iran, when they have any meetings, they will constantly talk to you about the fact that we need to have a multipolar world, and we're not going to stop. As a matter of fact, the supreme leader of Iran, Sayyid Ali Khamenei, in one of his recent speeches, he said that the future of the region will be shaped by the resistance. The future of the region, Arab states, the Middle East or West Asia, will be shaped by the resistance, meaning they are aware of the attempts coming from the United States and administration to dictate the shape of the region, a shape that will only lead to total submission of Israel. Recognize Israel by force, and if you don't recognize them by force, then be very, very careful of the consequences. This is a message from the United States, not just from Israel. Israel is implementing that through a genocidal sociopath leading the country into oblivion. So we don't have any prospect of a solution anytime soon. There are talks in the background. However, all of that on all fronts failed. It failed with Gaza. How many times did we speak about the negotiation rounds? But now Hamas hasn't been speaking with them for several months now because they know what they're up to. So from their perspective, we don't even want to talk. You don't want to go back to what we agreed upon. You don't want to go back to even the Biden proposal previously in accordance to UN resolutions. Then we don't want to talk. You're just trying to buy time and cover up your massacres and genocide by having these talks and showing as if you're trying to reach a solution. That's with Gaza, and it's been happening for a year now. And this year, don't underestimate that. They could have reached a solution. Why? We had a temporary ceasefire 1.5 months in, didn't we? That could have been extended, but Israel decided to break it. So they are not interested in reaching a ceasefire. If they wanted that ceasefire would have been there from a very long time ago. But that's in Gaza, and that's something that the negotiating delegation, the Israeli negotiating delegation, warned from. They said if we're going to continue down the same pattern, and Benjamin Netanyahu continues to throw sticks in the wheel and create new hurdles and making it impossible for us to reach a deal, we could be negotiating for a year. Well, 1 year on, here we are. No negotiations, which means the man does not want to negotiate. He wants to dictate a new reality of the greater, stronger Israel that will have Benjamin Netanyahu as its king. Benjamin Netanyahu wants to be written down in history as the king of kings of Israel. The man views himself very highly, the longest serving prime minister, the man who went against even his closest allies for the sake of Israel. And not only that is that failing in Gaza when it comes to negotiations, it's failing in Lebanon. In Lebanon, the Lebanese themselves, so one of the people who were in charge of having the link between the Lebanese resistance and the United States administration, his name was Nabih Berri. Nabih Berri, he spoke with Amos Hochstein. And what did he say about him? He said, firstly, he comes with threats, to a level where Hochstein had to then try and say, no, I'm not coming with threats. I'm coming to tell you what the Israelis are telling me. Well, you're not a negotiator. You're not a mediator then. Take yourself out of the equation. And he promises us to get back after we tell him, look, this is what we want. This is what you can tell the Israelis. And by the way, what they want is very simple. Hezbollah told them from the beginning, stop the war in Gaza. We will automatically stop. You don't need to talk to us. We are only doing this as a supporting front to exhaust the military and not let them carry out an even bigger genocide in Gaza. And that's been evident because Israel deployed 2 divisions to Lebanon very early on. These 2 divisions, and at one point 40 to 50% of the total army's personnel and power, when it comes to air force and on the ground, tanks. They could have used that on Gaza. So Hezbollah were successful in doing that. But Israel did not want that because they have a different strategy. They are using what's happening to implement a strategy that they've had from the beginning. Re-established the new greater Israel like they were establishing a greater Israel during the early days of the formation of the state of Israel. They didn't even only take the borders that were there from the UN when it comes to the Jewish state. And of course, the other side did not want to split the state on ethnicity or religion. The Palestinian side, they wanted a whole state for everyone because from their perspective, well, we lived together for many years. Why do these European colonialists want to impose their will and create an ethno-state by terrorism against the will of the people? And this is what they've done. They've expelled the population, established it, but they didn't even establish a state based on the written and agreed split plans of Palestine. They expanded. And they didn't stop. They continued expanding. In 1967, they went and occupied Gaza and the West Bank. They occupied Sinai to a level where some Israelis, a very small amount of Israelis, one of them was actually the father of Miko Peled, who I had a podcast with, Mati Peled at the time, who was a general. He was viewing this at a time, and Miko wrote this in his book. I saw us occupying territories, and then all of a sudden our country wants to keep them. And he started having doubts, like, why do we want to control these areas? I thought we were Israel within our territories, and we just had this war. But clearly everything clicked. We're an expansionist entity wanting to grow further, occupy more territories of other nations. Now they believe that this is their opportunity. We want to expand as much as possible. The Gazans, we're going to have to force them out one way or another. Egypt is an obstacle. Of course, the resistance is an obstacle, but Egypt is a massive obstacle because they didn't enable them. They didn't allow them. They didn't submit to international pressure to completely open the borders and get all of the Palestinian population out of Gaza so that Israel not only can take Gaza, but have an excuse to go and after Sinai and then Egypt, because they would use that as a pretext against Egypt. The Palestinians would be fighting them Sinai and say, Egypt is responsible, we're going to occupy you. They're using in Lebanon, they're coming for the West Bank and Jordan, and we're seeing some of these statements and videos coming now from people in the Israeli government, including Smotrich and others as well. Even Netanyahu himself has this belief that, well, what? Jerusalem's borders, they end in Damascus. That's just Jerusalem's borders. So if Jerusalem's border is in Damascus, what are Israel's borders? Everything in the Middle East, so that they can create this power and be embedded in the region to control all of the resources and not have anyone challenging them and standing up against their attempts of complete control and hegemony in the region.